You always can say that you learn something good and bad from somebody, right? So with bodybuilders and the good, I think it would be like the work ethic, the drive, the ability to stay so focused and be consistent. Because consistency is everybody's problem, right? And most bodybuilders that are like pros are the most consistent, driven, regimented people. So that's definitely something to take from there.
Our next guest is Dylan Gemelli. Dylan is a bodybuilder holding 8 NASM, that's National Academy of Sports Medicine certifications. He is a fitness expert, a weight loss expert. He is the type of expert where 1.5 million people connect with him to learn from his expertise. He has expertise in SARMs, peptides, and steroids. So I'm really excited to dive deep with Dylan into the intersection of high-end bodybuilding, longevity, and biohacking.
The people that you think look the best, the bodybuilders, the people that model and everything, we're the worst. We've got the most issues, the most trouble with how we look, and the pressure, that never stops. It just doesn't stop. You win, you lose, you battle, you just don't give up. But it's a never-ending battle. You look in the mirror, somebody else will tell you how great you look, and you'll look and think, man, I just don't have it today. One of the biggest barriers that I've had is
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity Podcast. Our next guest is Dylan Gemelli. Dylan is a bodybuilder holding 8 NASM, that's National Academy of Sports Medicine certifications. He is a fitness expert, a weight loss expert. He is the type of expert where 1.5 million people connect with him to learn from his expertise. He has expertise in SARMs, which I'm going to learn what those are today, peptides and steroids. I have had other conversations with bodybuilders, and I have to be honest, I was not sure how much value I was going to be able to create for the audience from those episodes, but it turns out those episodes are some of the most popular, and it's been great value. So I'm really excited to dive deep with Dylan into the intersection of high-end bodybuilding, longevity, and biohacking. Dylan, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely, man. I'm looking forward to it, and I appreciate you having me on.
All right, so I was hoping to know a little bit about you, about your background before we jump into your expertise. As I was researching for this episode, it became clear to me that you have a wealth of information and you are passionate about sharing that information. You do this through your channel, your Instagram channel. You do this by speaking on panels, for example, at the Mr. Olympia 60th anniversary, which I hear was also a big deal for you, so that's exciting. It is one thing to develop an expertise. It is something very different to have a passion about sharing that expertise. When thinking about growing up as young Dylan Gemelli, where did you grow up and where did this passion come from?
So I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa, and I have lived all over the world, but I actually had moved back here. It's been 6 years already. I'm in the process of moving to Phoenix right now, but I grew up in Iowa. I live in Iowa, so I'm Midwest born and raised. I'm an only child, big time family guy, Italian family. So, just to go back, I started studying nutrition at 11 years old, man. And, I'll be honest with you, a lot of people like that get into health and fitness or biohacking, they have a story that something happened to them, something trauma, some kind of sickness, some kind of illness, some kind of reason for doing what they do. I was an overweight kid, yet a 4-sport athlete. And then I shot up from 5'8" to 6'1". I lost like 25, 30 pounds. And, from then on, I had kind of developed this body dysmorphia image because I just knew in my heart, that it just didn't look good. I didn't feel good. So it developed this eating disorder type of thing that I had to deal with forever. And that's why I became passionate with the food and understanding. I started studying nutrition labels. I mean, literally in 8th grade, understanding what they meant and implementing that throughout my life. I was a college basketball player and I got injured. And that's when I shifted towards the modeling career that I went after, even though I really didn't want to do it. My mom kind of pushed that on me. It was a little too feminine for me, but I developed this, well, I'm going to be around a bunch of girls. I'm going to be around, this lifestyle, everything I wanted I thought I wanted. And I tell this story and I'll keep it as brief as I can. But I was a real asshole when I was in my 20s. I was all about Dylan. And that's why I'm the complete opposite now, because that's just not what I was raised to be. And I fell into this trap of trying to live a life for everybody else, to impress people, things that don't matter, right? And so I started modeling. I was given a contract, went straight to Milan. And within this time, I'm doing nothing but partying, drinking, girls, trying to make as much money as I can. And it's hard to make money when you're just all over the place. The modeling doesn't pay you a ton, and you're traveling and you're here and you're there and you're everywhere, and you got these pressures. So partying, doing drugs, I started to sell drugs. And I don't know about you, but I think that most people realize 99% of the people that sell drugs do get caught. And
Yep.
I was one of those people. Shamed my parents into no other, shamed all the people that spent so much time and effort on me, and just basically threw everything I worked for away. I was given a 15-year prison sentence, and I drained my parents' accounts, got the best attorney in the state who got me what is called a suspended sentence, meaning you get the 15-year sentence, but you get put on probation. And if you make it through, then, you're still a convicted felon, but you never go to prison. Well, I told you I was an asshole. And 3 times I violated, they finally said, you just don't get it, man. So at 28 years old, 15 years, goodbye. So you can imagine, and I won't get into all the details of what I went through and what it was like. I mean, that's for another story for another day. But laws in Iowa are different. So within 2 years, I was able to get out. By the time I was, did everything I was supposed to, they cut your time in half and in half again. And my parents had moved to Maui. And so I leave prison in Iowa to go to Maui, right? And I was given 5 years parole, was done in 1, perfect behavior. And I'm a very spiritual guy, and I was working with God, working within myself. And I would say these prayers about, I'm in no hurry to meet somebody, but when it's the time's right, well, that's when I met my wife, who was the polar opposite, like the polar opposite of me. Never drank, never smoked, never got in any trouble. And when I met her, everything changed because it made me want to be better, and start taking care of my family, start taking care of everything. So I moved to Las Vegas. I had some opportunities there because when I was in Hawaii, that's when I started to study fitness and study. I got into steroids because I'm such a big sports fan. So I started studying steroids from baseball, really, is what made me start studying in the baseball era, And I got onto these bodybuilding forums, and they found me quickly on there, my personality, my engagement. And a big supplement company came to me and they said, hey, we want you to start making videos on YouTube. And I'm like, shit, okay. And they said, we want you to talk about steroids. So my red flags went up because I just got out of trouble. And so I immediately was like, hey, I am not doing one thing to get in trouble. Well, we found out there's no legalities or issues, just talking about them and discussing and educating. So I said, all right, let's roll. Well, within that time, then they came to me and said, we want you to start marketing for research chemical companies. I'm like, what? I don't know what the hell that is. Well, come to find out it was SARMs and peptides, which at the time, not many people were talking about. I'm talking 2011, and there was 7 to 10 peptides to choose from and 3 SARMs, which one wasn't even actually technically a SARM, which we'll get into later. But now there's thousands of peptides. So I've watched this evolve from where it was to then. So I start making videos talking about things no one's talking about. There was like 3 or 4 guys. So you can imagine my popularity went from like a nobody to like, I'm up to 500,000 subscribers on YouTube in a couple of years. Instagram wasn't really a thing at that time, and Facebook was Facebook. You can only have 5,000. So YouTube was everything. And my channel got shut down in 2019. I had a bunch of people reporting on it and trying to get it shut down, even though there's all this content out there. I'm not going to play the victim role. Let's just say I got screwed a little bit on that deal. So I had to start from scratch again. And it took me a while. And within that time, I said, you know what? I'm going to build my Instagram. I'm going to build my social media. So I rebuilt. Well, then this year it culminated with me getting invited to actually speak at the Mr. Olympia as a video influencer guy with doctors and professionals. And then I was also asked to be a co-host for the Monica Brandt show. And if people that don't know who she is, she was one of the first Miss Fitness Olympias. So I went from having nothing earlier this year to not only speaking on the panels, but then having a booth and doing a podcast with every big major, bodybuilder from the past. Well, we were sponsored by Stem Regen, which is like a stem cell company in the biohacking space.
I have his book. It used to be on my desk. It's actually in my other office.
It's a good book. And I'm going to get right to that. I read it when I got home from the Mr. Olympia. So after the Mr. Olympia, you can imagine the high that I'm on because I really did well. I really did. And I'm not trying to, I'm not a Dylan this guy at all, but I really did.
Let me interject here because I know that feeling, right? Like you're a guy who does a lot of research, doesn't necessarily have the credentials of the people sitting next to you, and you walk away with like, I did really well. Like I hung with these people. And my first experience with that, just to share, was with Dr. Gundry. I was on Dr. Gundry's podcast. That guy's, a former practicing pediatric cardiothoracic heart surgeon. What do I even have to converse with him about? And so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, that's awesome too. I'm having him on in about 3 weeks too, so I'm stoked for that. That's a big one for you too. That's awesome.
He is awesome. Yeah.
Oh shit, I know it. I know he's controversial, but I love him.
Yeah.
So I was there with them, and I get home. Now, mind you, I have all these certifications and I have all the knowledge base to sit up there with a lot of the alternative doctors, especially when we're talking about peptides. I'm not going to be able to talk about certain things, but I've been studying cardiology and everything that's important with blood panels because I do hormone optimization. But I came home with all of these doctors wanting to come podcast with me, talk with me. I got COVID right when I got home, man, like literally within a day. Because like an asshole, I got off the plane, went straight to the gym, and just, I'm sure my immune system got down. And normally when something like that would happen, I'd just be like, woe is me, that type of deal. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it to God this time and trust that there's a reason. And by doing that, I realized I should have been in this biohacking space the whole time because I started to look into Stem Regen, which was sponsoring me. And I was like, man, what this term biohacking, I studied it and I said, dude, I've been doing this for forever. So what happened was I started to go and seek out the biggest biohackers there are, like the biggest names. I thought, you know what? I have spent so much time starting from the bottom. I'm going for the gold. And I have landed some of the biggest names. I've been invited. I went to the A4M I was just at. I was on the red carpet event there. And I've landed some of the biggest names for podcasts. I've got JJ Virgin, Dr. Gundry. I had Misha Tate on immediately. So I've had some pretty big things going. And so that's where we're here today, man. Like, I feel like right now we're on the forefront of an opportunity that has not presented itself. And I'm not going to get political, but the facts are with the administration change, we're going to have the opportunity to speak more freely and work on health and fixing our foods and fixing all of these things that we never had the chance to do before. That type of stuff's going to get brought out. And I want to use my platform because that's what my God-given ability was to do. Not talk about steroids, but was to talk about helping people, fixing their foods, fixing their diet, fixing their health. So right now, I'm solely working on bringing that message to light and making a real difference for people.
Man, that's amazing. So I've got a couple things, right?
Yeah.
You go from body dysmorphia, right, to modeling, and you were in the industry. It's probably more prevalent than people think, but from the outside in, from the outside looking in, you're like, they're all beautiful people. How could they possibly have any sort of body dysmorphia ever, even in their history, right? So I don't even know that there's any comment on that.
Well, I'll tell you this. The people that you think look the best, the bodybuilders, the people that model and everything, we're the worst. We've got the most issues, the most trouble with how we look and the pressure, that never stops. It just doesn't stop. And you fight it forever. You win, you lose, you battle, you just don't give up. But it's a never-ending battle. You look in the mirror, somebody else will tell you how great you look, and you'll look and think, man, I just don't have it today. And it's a struggle, man. It's a struggle.
You look amazing. You're like, I don't agree with you.
It takes a very mentally strong person to overcome a lot of these demons and issues. And it's a battle that you got to be prepared to be 24/7 ready to wage war against, honestly, really.
So it's interesting because in general, I believe that success, right? And we'll just talk about financial success is a struggle against yourself, right? Like I love to say, I got some good news and I got some bad news. The bad news is that everything that you're not achieving is entirely your fault. The good news is that everything you're not achieving is entirely your fault, because if it was somebody else's fault, you can't change it.
Right.
And then I had never really thought about it in the bodybuilding space or the aesthetic space in general, that there's also the physicality, right? So there's the financial success, like you might have hangups about earning lots of money, but then you also have the compounding effect of you have limiting beliefs about how good you're supposed to look. Like those are two things. That's interesting. I never really thought about that. The other thing that resonated with me was you got this suspended sentence and kind of immediately went back to your old ways.
Oh yeah.
I would submit it's because you didn't change your environment. Like, what would you do different today? That hey, you get this suspended sentence. Like, would you just move to Hawaii? Maybe that was the solution. Or what would you do today to make sure that re-infraction didn't happen?
I'm going to say two things to that. One, I got what I deserved, and it changed my life. And had that not happened and everything didn't fall into place, I would have never moved to Hawaii. I would have never met my wife. I would have never. So I wouldn't say that I would change it, but if I could, I would have really thought about other people as opposed to woe is me and thinking about myself. All I did was think about how bad it was for me and how this was against me and this and that, even though it was my mistake. And when I was in prison, I called my mom one time. And I'll never forget this conversation. And I was complaining about how bad it was, how rough. And she's like, you call home and you complain about this all the time, and you never think about how everybody else feels that worries about you, that you affected, that you let down, that you did this to. And I never forgot that conversation. That and her asking me, what did me and your dad do that was so wrong? Like, where did we go wrong? And I had to tell her, I started to tear up a little bit. And I said, you know what? You didn't do one thing wrong. I made these choices. It had nothing to do with you. It was me. And I get it. I did change the people that I was around somewhat, but it fell right back into, I'm going to push the envelope here. And I was dating a girl at the time, and this was when MySpace was huge, right? Like that was the thing. Well, I was modeling and acting, and I was around those kind of people. She was like a Miss MySpace. She was like 5-6 years younger than me. She wanted me to do this, do that. So first, I left the state without permission to go see her, right? That was the first reason I got in trouble. It's not like a big deal, but it's illegal, And it was shit like that I just didn't get it, man. And you think you're invincible and you think nothing can happen to you until it does, So.
And then one other thing, in this whole process of cleaning up, you said you moved to Vegas. There seems like a little bit of an oxymoron, Vegas being what Vegas is, but it worked out in the end. So I'm glad about that. Let's jump in. So I feel like you're deeply entrenched in this kind of biohacking world. We'll say biohacking, longevity, health span. What do you think biohackers have to learn from bodybuilders? And I'm saying bodybuilder. I don't know that you ever were on stage as a bodybuilder, but you've been building your body this whole time. So I think that's the exact right phrase. What do you think biohackers and longevity people have to learn from bodybuilders?
That's a good question, and it's a twofold question, because I'm going to tell you what they should learn from them in the positive light and the negative light. So one is that you always can say that you learn something good and bad from somebody, right? And tendency. So with bodybuilders and the good, I think it would be like the work ethic, the drive, the ability to stay so focused and be consistent, because consistency is everybody's problem, right? Diet is everybody's major issue, and it's the consistency aspect, and it's the consistency why people fail, why they don't accomplish the things they want to accomplish. And most bodybuilders that are like pros are the most consistent, driven, regimented people. So that's definitely something to take from there. Now, in contrast, bodybuilders don't tend to, and I'm not saying all of them, because I got some that are close friends that I don't want this to take as a pot shot, but this is the reality of it. One of the biggest barriers that I've had is the guys that they just don't care about tomorrow. All they care about is right now. How much size can I gain? At what cost? It doesn't matter, and that lack of long-term thinking, I think, is something you can also take from them and utilize it in a positive manner. Start to think long-term. Don't just think about tomorrow. Think about how things are going to affect you later, how they're going to affect people you love later. If you're not taking care of yourself, how's that going to affect your wife, your kids? These guys, they'll just care about what can I get out of right now? I don't care about these steroids that I'm taking, how they're going to affect me. I don't care about the consequences. I don't care if I'm going to be broke down and shriveled up and have all of these injuries and problems. It doesn't matter, because it's right now. So that's the good and the bad that you could really take from them both. Now, on the chemistry side, there's good there by learning about different types of supplements, different types of SARMs and peptides. But then again, you take that and you in contrast, learn how to not do what they do and be abusive, and not, because there's a huge abuse there. And a lot of these things, while dangerous regardless, you could mitigate a lot of the problems that are had and a lot of the assumptions that are made if they were just used properly.
Mm-hmm. So I love this, because when you break it down, right, having the focus and ability to be consistent, and then also focusing long term, these are both mental pieces, right?
Yeah.
Like you might have expected, oh, I don't know, this is the right bicep curl, right? Or you might have expected this is the right nutrition plan. But both of your points are about mentality, and I couldn't agree more. I've often said that I believe success is incredibly boring. And I give the example of Michael Phelps, right? He swam the same damn lap 2,000 times a day,
right,
every day of the 365 days a year for decades. He ate the same 15,000 calories. It was some crazy amount because he was burning so many calories, right? And it was the same, and it was the same slab of chicken. And I know bodybuilders, same thing, like it's the chicken and broccoli day after day after day. So this mindset about how can you make the mundane or the boring something that you can thrive on. Do you have any like pointers on that? Like how does somebody take something how do you drive that kind of consistency?
So it's hard, because some people just are naturally like intrinsically motivated. Mm-hmm. That's how I am. I don't care what it is, what comes up when I'm traveling, when I'm doing this, when I'm doing that. I have a regiment that I follow. Now, being in prison really puts you in a more regimented style, but I was raised that way. My dad was like that. I was like that. So when you get into a plan and a rhythm and it makes you feel good, and then you don't have that, it's a problem. And you should want to feel good daily. You should want the mentality, like you've brought up now multiple times, like it so much in life revolves around your mental. And I don't want to go off topic, but it's like when people ask me, what is biohacking? I always tell them it starts with your mentality, by finding yourself first. Because if you can't find yourself first, you're never going to be able to fix your problems, because you have to be in the right state to fix your problems. So the mentality aspect on all of this is so important, and getting yourself there. Now, there's a lot of barriers to overcome, even for someone like me that's self-driven. There's things come up, things happen. If you want to do something, you're going to make time. You're going to get up a little bit earlier. You're going to sacrifice something else maybe you have this TV time dedicated, or this time that you have dedicated to something that you just don't need to do. Or maybe it's going to be, I want to go out to eat this and this, but I just know it's going to ruin everything I worked all week for. Is it really worth it? Like, is it really, really worth it? I get that a lot, and it's like, no way, dude. I just busted my ass all week long. I'm not going to ruin this in an hour. No, but you have to. A lot of this is think before you do, think before you act, and think about think about what's going to come from that before you make that decision. And look, we all fall in this. We want something right now. We want it right when we want it. And we don't think about things. The older you get, the little bit more long-term that you do think, and you realize, man, time is, I have a greater value on time because it was taken from me. But as you get older, I mean, and I don't know how most people are, but I feel like we start to see our mortality. Like when I hit 40, I'm like, man, even if I live to 80, I'm over halfway there. Like, shit, And I think it's a battle with yourself a lot of the times more than anything else. But if you can start figuring out little things to do, you're going to feel better and you're going to want to do more. And a lot of that's diet related, and a lot of it's like getting sunlight, getting sleep. And that's stuff we can get into that I can talk about. But it all starts within, man.
Yeah. So we talked about nutrition. It's come up a couple of times. And about, hey, I don't want to blow it in 1 hour. That's probably a meal or a dessert or whatever. Do you have an indulgence that you allow yourself but control it so that it's from time to time?
Me personally, not really. But I don't disagree with that for people at all. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. You're asking me a personal question. Not really, man. Like Thanksgiving, maybe on our anniversary, but anymore, look.
But what, by the way, what does your indulgent look like? Because it might not look like other people. Yeah. Are you taking like one bite of cake and that's my indulgence? And other people are like, well, I would have had a cake or two.
Ideally, it would be like I love ice cream, so that would be my ideal indulgence. Now, how often I do it, not really. So maybe for me, when I indulge, it's like I'm just eating extra calories. So I'm eating like extra. I'm a big nut butter guy. That's one of the things. So it's like I'll have an extra thing of walnut butter or cashew butter, or I'll add extra to whatever I'm having. And that's kind of like my indulgence, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
Now my preference would be like, I'm like a mint chocolate chip freak, right? So it would be that or pizza or pasta, because that's what I was raised on, but it's okay to do that once in a while, and to do that, I'm not a heavy carb eater or anything like that, but I would love to sit down and have like a half a pizza sometime if I could,
Yes. Yeah. Mine is a little square of dark chocolate and a little square of milk chocolate. And I that's that wraps up my day. And it's the thing that I feel like is the wall between me and a cheesecake, right? Like, hey, you get this and we're good. Like we're in good shape.
You know what? I'll tell you this, what I do that's my treat every day is that I have a Quest bar right before I start lifting. And I know, like, as clean as I eat, those aren't bad by any stretch. It's not like there's a couple things in there that I wouldn't recommend, but it's like the only thing I have. And that's my treat every day, honestly. And that sounds lame as hell, but that's what it is.
No, I mean, that is the mindset. Like if you can figure out, I knew this one couple who had convinced their kids that the little baby carrots were this unbelievably savory. That was like when they were on their best behavior, they got little baby carrots. And I was
love it.
That is genius. Absolutely genius. High, they're kind of high in fructose, right? Carrots are. So the kids enjoy them.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes. Send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code. That'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
All right, let's get into, and I know you're probably, as you're moving into biohacking, you're probably almost moving away from steroids in general, but you have a lot of knowledge, and I do want to tap into that. Mm-hmm. Where do you think steroids might fit into a biohacker's world? And we're talking about, like, maybe not even me. I do work out about 5 to 6 days a week. A lot of the people, frankly, that you meet at biohacking conventions, they're not doing that. They're, 3 days a week. And where might steroids fit in their life? And maybe they don't.
I'm always going to coach on steroids probably, and just give the knowledge base more on the preventative side. I've always tried to encourage people not to use them, but I do want to make sure that if you are, because I know you are, and I'm not enabling by any stretch, but I want to make sure that they're used properly. I would say that testosterone would be the only one I would say that would fit into a biohacker's life for TRT, if you need, that kind of replacement therapy. Otherwise, it doesn't. What would fit into like the biohacking world, there's not really a steroid other than possibly Proviron that would fit into any kind of biohacker's world. And I say that Proviron because so when you take an oral steroid, for example, like an Anavar, a Winstrol, an Anadrol, those are what's called C17 alpha alkylated to allow a pass through the liver. Now, by doing that alteration to them, they're heavily toxic. So they're going to, and some more so than others, but they're all going to negatively affect your liver. They're going to negatively affect your kidneys, your blood pressure, and your cholesterol. It's a guarantee. Now, to what extent? Depends on the dose, depends on the person, but it's all going to be present. So none of that really goes into a biohacker's life, right? There's no real good steroid for that. But Proviron is an oral, but it's a steroid, but it's not toxic. So it's not having those negative effects. Now, another thing when you take a steroid is it's going to suppress your natural testosterone. The good thing about Proviron is that's very minimal on how much it's going to actually suppress, and it's not going to ruin it or crash it. Now, the big benefits on Proviron is that it can lower your SHBG, which is your sex hormone binding globulin. Now, for those that don't understand, when you go get your testosterone checked, you're going to get a total testosterone number and a free testosterone. Everybody focuses on the total, which is you need to know that number, but the free is the most important. That's going to tell you the most. Well, my point is that when you have an elevated level of SHBG, it bounds up your free testosterone. So it'll lower your number, and then people may think they need TRT when they don't. And so one of the things that I do is hormone optimizing for many people now all over the world. And I have to look at these things and understand them. You just don't put people on TRT. You got to explore the cause of the problem. And Proviron plays a key role there. It's anti-estrogenic, and it has a little bit of muscle hardening because it's a DHT, dihydrotestosterone compound. And, it could potentially cause some hair loss if you're prone to male pattern baldness. But aside from that, that's one that I could, if I had to pick one for a biohacker, that would be the one that I would select aside from the obvious with testosterone.
And that's Proviron?
Proviron.
Proviron.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads into, and really could have asked this first, one of the big issues as you start to think about longevity is muscle mass, right? Sarcopenia is this muscle wasting, literally that's what it means. And as we age, we tend to lose muscle mass.
Oh, yeah.
And muscle mass is highly correlated with longevity. So where do you think as a biohacker is trying to address sarcopenia, maybe it's Proviron is potentially the steroid, maybe there's some SARMs, peptides, like what do you start to say, like one of them is, and I know you would co-sign this, move heavy things, like you need to be moving heavy things so that you can grow or sustain. I'm 55. I think I've added 5 to 8 pounds of muscle this year.
Nice.
By changing my diet. And if you look at the chart, it's back at 40 when it's supposed to be dropping.
Yeah.
So
sick.
that is an average. That is not a guarantee. Like you can make adjustments. But what might you throw in there in terms of, first off, what is a SARM? And let's start there because I'm really wasn't familiar with the phrase.
SARMs are just selective androgen receptor modulators is what that means. And they're very selective with the androgen receptor. And so that helps to lessen the side effects, far different than steroids. Now, you bring up the sarcopenia. Well, if you go back in literature and you study like most SARMs and you go look at their profiles, like the early stage ones, they're all going to tell you that the reason they were developed was to prevent muscle wastage and osteoporosis. That was their intention at the start. For like, you'll see that and it'll be consistent. And now we'll get into this too, but now the ones that are coming out are basically just steroids. They're just basically, you might as well just run a steroid at this point, because they're that strong and they're that heavy and that much suppression and side effects. But so your early stage ones, your MK2866, which is also known as Osterin, your S4, which is known as Andrin, your LGD4033, which is known as Ligandrol. Like these are the pillars of the forefront, right? And that was their main focus: prevent muscle wastage. So HIV patients, cancer patients, people that suffer from severe muscle wastage. That's what they were looking for with these. That's why they developed them. Now, I will say this: creatine has become so much more popular the past couple of years. And in the biohacking world, there's a great understanding for the use of creatine and the multitude of benefits aside from just gaining strength and muscle. Creatine is not just for bodybuilders, and that's a huge misconception. And we can get into that too if you want to talk about SARMs first. But I just want to point that out, that if we're looking for something that is the safest, most proven, most effective that you can give to a 12-year-old or a 90-year-old, it's creatine. So I just want to point that out.
And I'll add to that, and we can get back to SARMs, is that actually last night I met with, I'm in kind of a marketing group here in Houston, met with a guy, and he's struggling with some PTSD, right? And he shared with me he's doing like 20 grams, right? Typical creatine is about 5 grams. He's doing like 20
heavy.
grams, and it's significantly positively impacting kind of the mental challenges, like the stress that he's having. So it's not just for muscles anymore.
No. One of the beauties of creatine is the cognitive help. And you know what else? Menopausal women, pre-post, right in the middle of it, it is so big for them because they do start to have like bone issues and things like that. But it's also helping them with, I mean, let's keep it real. When you're in that kind of state, you're having hormones all over the place and it's throwing off your mood and everything. And it's really helping them a lot. I've got my wife on it right now and it's helping her. She's kind of in that stage and she handles it well, but she still has her days. And like I say, my mom, I'm putting her on it, and I've got kids in high school, and it's perfectly safe for them. And that's literally one of the only safe supplements aside from amino acids and protein powders for high schoolers that I would ever recommend. So yeah, creatine's a big one, man. And we can get into that later. I just wanted to throw that out there. So.
No, I think it was really important. So you talked about a couple of the SARMs. How would they be different than steroids, right? So you said some of the newer SARMs are more like steroids. Are they having the same kind of liver impact? And then, if you were, is SARM something would even recommend to somebody these days, and in what context?
So it's a slippery slope because SARMs are a gray area. So first of all, anybody that understands like SARMs, you can't really go get a prescription or a script for like you can with certain peptides. Every SARM that you're going to get has to be sold as what's called a research chemical, and they will say not for human consumption. That's how it has to be done legally to sell. That doesn't mean that you can't take it. Because I remember when I first found him and I said, what, you want me to market shit that says not for human consumption? Like, what are you talking about? I don't want to touch this. Listen, the companies now, they got a lot of balls and they do a lot of things to push the FDA. They advertise for bodybuilding. They talk about, the results. If you do that as a company, any second you could get shut down and prosecuted and et cetera. Like there's a fine line on how you cross. And I work with several research companies and a lot of them I help with their verbiage and a lot of, the things that they need to be very careful on. A lot of them don't want to listen. And so, they're playing with fire. But anyway, that's the first thing to understand. There are definitely some. I'm known as the SARMs guy online. I mean, so I'm a big proponent of them, but I do. I've even been wrong in the past on certain biomarkers, and I think things have changed too because, early stage, I think when you were getting the purest forms that you were seeing like better blood panels, and I think now you don't always know what you're getting because most of these companies don't test them. I know a couple that are very stringent and very careful, but you'll see different blood markers. You'll see these peer reviews and articles about how dangerous some of these are that I know personally shouldn't be. There's still some danger there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to act like there's not side effects there, but there's a lot more mild ones.
For clarity there, you're talking, the research papers are saying how dangerous when they purchased it to use it, and you know if it were in its pure form, that shouldn't be dangerous.
It should not be as bad as they make it sound on some of them. Now, some of them, I'll agree 100%, like if I'm keeping it real, but, like your MK2866, that's more on the lighter side of things. But like for women do really well with it, but it will throw your menstrual cycle off. It can give you an enlarged clitoris, for example. Like that's what it's known for. For men, I've seen some liver values come back. It's not something that converts to estrogen, but I've seen it irritate people estrogenically, which is strange. There's not a good explanation for it. S4 can cause vision side effects. So what happens is, and S4 is one of my favorites, by the way, because it's like more like a Winstrol or an Anavar. It's muscle hardening. It gives you a lot of vascularity, and it's funny because it doesn't give you a ton of size, but it makes you strong as hell. But it has benefits for your prostate, right? And a lot of steroids will just wreck your prostate. Now, what I was talking about, the vision side effects. So what happens is there's a metabolite in the S4 compound, and it can bind to your eye receptor. I don't know if it will or if it won't. I don't know how much it'll take. I just know that I have a protocol that will ease you into it. Now, what happens is it does hit people hard. It nothing permanent, nothing that's going to blind you. It's a very short half-life, but it will freak some people out because you go from dark to light, and the lights will get like, you'll see this yellow tint. So the first time I used it, I was living in Maui, and I would work late, and I would come home at like 10 at night. So when I was taking it, if a car was coming and the lights, the headlights would come, you'd be like, whoa, because you'd see all of this shit all around you, and it would throw you off. But it's nothing permanent, but these are side effects to be aware of, So a lot of people will have to take it 5 days on and 2 days off so it gets out of your system and doesn't bind so quickly. Now, you start getting into the newer ones, your S23, for example, that's a glorified steroid, man. And I've used it. It is a beast, but it's a glorified steroid. LGD 3303, which is an enhanced version of 4033, that basically just a steroid. You could put 10, 15 pounds on with that thing, but you got to be very careful because it will suppress your testosterone heavily. S23 is termed a male contraceptive. It will completely shut you down.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And most of these, obviously including the steroids and the SARMs, and my understanding of steroids is it just speeds your recovery so that you can work your next workout, you can work out more intensely and make those workouts more effective. Like what is it actually doing? I think a lot of people are like steroids, bodybuilders, I don't know what it's doing.
So it's twofold because it depends on the steroid. So some steroids will convert to estrogen heavily, right? So you got these side effects that are going to come with it. But like a D-ball, for example, it'll make you feel euphoric. You feel like a god in the gym. Now, there's some that have such a slew of side effects. And this is one of my arguments. It's like, hey, you can get these results, but if you feel so bad that you can barely work out, what's the point? Like a trenbolone, for example, that everybody wants to use. And it is the best steroid, but it has the worst side effects. So, and a lot of these people will say, oh, it's going to heal this or it's going to recover that, but not really. Because if you think long term, a lot of these, especially, so for instance, let's say I put you on a cycle and you gain 15 pounds, 20 pounds. But think about the amount of pressure that you're putting on your joints, your tendons, and your ligaments to grow that amount of size.
What's the time frame for that 15 pounds? Like, what does that look like?
Depends on what you're running and where your size at and what your diet's like. So D-ball. D-ball is heavily estrogenic, so you're going to retain a ton of water. So I've seen people gain 15, 20 pounds in 4 weeks. But here's the problem. Not only are you gaining too much too fast, but a lot of that water is going to dissipate, right? And so you're going to yo-yo up, yo-yo down, put all this pressure on your joints, ligaments, and tendons. And this is why you see a lot of bodybuilders as they age. Well, they have all of these nagging injuries all the time. These huge guys, they're always hurt and they can't do anything. And it's a constant battle. Now, there's some, like my favorite steroid's Primobolan, and it's very, very mild the whole way through, and it's just slow, consistent gains. If you run a steroid cycle, this is the problem with people that they don't understand. Because when you run a cycle of steroids, you can gain a bunch of weight on cycle, but by the time you come off, you're not going to keep all of that no matter what you do. There's this recovery period coming off. Now, I like Primobolan because the gains are much more keepable, because when your side effects are lower and it's slow and steady, if you gain like 3 to 4 pounds of muscle and keep it, and I mean keep it, I don't give a shit how much you gain on cycle and lose. It doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
That's why I like SARMs so much, because you will not gain as much size and strength with SARMs as you will steroids. No way. But by the time it's all said and done, what you keep, you very well could be keeping more with them, right? Yeah. I care about keepability. I care about your longevity and your health. So how does your blood panel look after we're done and you recover? I care about that.
Yeah. So if we look at biohackers, right, and really addressing sarcopenia, are we just working or should we maybe stay away from steroids and SARMs and peptides? We haven't really talked about peptides yet. I think the answer might be not necessarily to stay away from peptides. But like even you said S4 as a SARM was one of your favorites. Is there any reason for a biohacker to be doing that, or that's really kind of pushing the edge more than a biohacker needs to?
So I don't have an issue with SARMs with biohackers to an extent, but I think a biohacker may when they look at side effects, right?
Okay, yeah.
Now, there's definitely help with sarcopenia there. Now, peptides would be by far the most biohacker friendly and the best option. It's not even close. It's not even debatable. That's like there's no way you can debate that fact, because peptides are so much more proven. They're so much more safe. They don't have any of these alterations or side effects like SARMs and steroids do. Now, there's side effects that are possible with anything that you take, and there certainly are present with things like peptides. But there's peptides like, especially for just healing purposes, oh my gosh, like BPC 157, TB 500, which are the most prevalently and well-known peptides that one can use. There's so many options. You know, you got your growth hormone releasing peptides or growth hormone releasing hormones, like your ipamorelin, sermorelin, very popular, CJC 1295. These can all have benefits for sarcopenia and helping with muscle gain. Tesamorelin, even though it's weight loss oriented, it has muscle gain involved in it. So the list is so long of peptides that, you know, that would be good for that one could use. And there's plenty of options for people that one may not work for or fit in for somebody. There's so many options. Peptides have come such a long way, man, from when I started. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I think kind of minimal side effects, right? Everybody was disappointed when the FDA came in and said, let's take all these useful ones off. And you're like, there's no side effects here. Right? You know, I am not a big conspiracy theory kind of person, but when you see things like that, you're like, what's going on? Like, what is there doesn't seem to be any logic here. So yeah, I start to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. Hey, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's a fact, dude. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's just a bunch of people making bad decisions on behalf of somebody else.
Exactly.
So I saw a video with you, and you and the host were discussing, like, you cannot biohack your way out of a body that lacks metabolic flexibility. You're talking about if you're not insulin resistant, if you're not fat adapted, if you don't have that flexibility, like, and the whole time you were like just nodding vigorously. Talk about your perspective on like jumping into, I don't know, we'll throw in jumping into a red light sauna when you really don't have the rest of it managed first.
Yes. You know what? I'm gonna relate this for you to steroid cycles. I get these people and they want to run every steroid under the sun. They want to do this, they want to do that, but they're not in the proper condition. Look, there's so many ways that you could hurt yourself with steroids in good condition, right? So you think that you're 40 pounds overweight and that you're going to start using steroids. It's a bad idea. You're way more susceptible to estrogen conversion. Chances are you got high blood pressure, cholesterol, things all over the map. If you're not physically ready to use them, then what are we doing? You're not going to make any progress, right? It just doesn't make any sense. Same with biohacking. You've got to get yourself readily prepared. Like if you have health issues, if you have things going on, it's a step-by-step process. It's like if you're overweight, you got to tear down first and then rebuild. I get these guys, they're like, you know, I want to lose 40 and 50 pounds, but I don't want to lose any muscle. And I'm like, dude, don't we all? I mean, shit, don't we all? That's not how it works.
Wait, let me get my magic wand out. We can do that.
Yeah, I mean, That's like saying, when I start learning how to play basketball, man, I just want to start shooting 3-pointers from Steph Curry range. Like, dude, it's just not plausible. You have to, it's a process. So with biohacking, it's a process too. You can start doing certain things like basic stuff, getting up in the morning, taking your morning walk. That's biohacking, getting enough sleep. But if you want to start really like seeing these drastic changes, yes, you have to fix your diet. You got to start working on that first before you can expect change to occur. So if your metabolism screwed up, you're not fat adapted, if you're not eating the right kinds of foods. And look, everybody's different. I'm a data-driven guy. Like, for instance, I just got a CGM, which is a continuous glucose monitor for people that don't understand. So I'm going to start monitoring every little damn thing that I do in terms of what I eat, when, how it is when I've slept, how my glucose is spiking if I don't sleep enough, how it is if I dress up my carbs, so to speak. So if I put, more fats in there to try to stop the glucose spikes, or if I have pre-protein or pre-vegetables, which is good for preventing glucose spikes, timings of the day. Everything's data driven, and you got to learn that about yourself, because we're all different. Like, I just sent in a DNA test with what's it? I don't even know. I think it's called Alter, to see what kind of foods my DNA is saying. Just to compare and contrast what's actually working for me. And I like to test all of these things out. So you have to put yourself in the right state to expect results, and that takes time. This stuff does not happen overnight. It just doesn't.
So you were talking about a lot of things that sound new to you, right? So you've, in a sense, been a biohacker for a very long time, and then you start talking about getting a genetic test to understand how your body reacts to food. That's kind of deeply planted in the biohacking world. When I say, hey, what have you learned from the biohacking world that has really resonated with you? What has?
I mean, some of it's the basic stuff that we just overlook on a day-to-day basis. So like I said, getting up and getting outside and walking right away, walking after meals, looking at data, like your personal data, like I was talking about. These things, man, like these are things you just don't think about or do. And the importance of that is just astounding. The ways about going about trial and error properly, more controlled, and finding who you are and listening to yourself and learning from yourself is so key, man. Like a lot of the biohacking things are very basic, and a lot of them can be a little bit more complex, but that's how you ease into it and learn. And what I'm learning is how important like timing of things are, scheduling of things are, and like literally all of these little things, how much they add up into a big all-around component that, a lot of people hear the term biohacking, they treat it like Bitcoin when Bitcoin first came out. Oh, that's impossible. I don't get it. It's like, no, you didn't even give it a chance. Just like read it and learn it and understand it, and then try to implement and see the change. I'm a 10, 15 mile a day cardio guy, 5 days a week, heavy resistance trainer, but I wasn't doing these basic, like getting up and walking and things. And I'm eating 800 more calories than I was eating. And my fat content went from like 25 grams a day to 100. And I am more cut now than the last time. The last time I was this cut, I was on a heavy steroid cycle. Okay. Honestly. And I made all of these diet changes and things, and it was just from like learning about different steps in my biohacking. And I am now, granted, like I've told you before, those were battles I've had. I am a nutrition coach, and I was doing the polar opposite of what I teach people. Still living that 90s low fat diet, scared of this. Brother, I was eating like 1700 calories a day. I'm burning 4,000 easy. Yeah. Easy. So I had tanked my metabolism. I was eating like 14 servings of vegetables a day. That's all I was eating all day was that. The only fats I was getting was from peanut butter and out of a Quest bar. And then it was like oats and egg whites. Dude, now I'm eating like everything that I've always wanted to eat. I'm like avocados, ground beef every day, heavy amounts of fish. Like I eat almost a pound of fish, whether it's salmon or sea bass, every day. And just enjoying it so much more. And I'm look better. Like this right here I was drinking, it was a bulletproof coffee, but it was with SCT oil instead of MCT oil, because SCT is a short chain triglyceride, and that's got way more CLA release, like grass-fed butter, for example. And I was so terrified of all of this stuff. And it's like, it's so good for you, and it makes you feel so much better. Like right now, I would have been struggling to keep my eyes open with you. Honestly, I only slept 5-6 hours last night. I had so much to do, and I'd be thinking about eating right now because I'd be so hungry all day. Man, I ain't thinking about nothing but our conversation now and how fun it is.
Yeah, and we actually have an MCT product. I'll be sure to get some over to you, and
Please.
I do similar to Bulletproof Coffee with our MCT, but I cut out the ghee. I just didn't really want the calories of the ghee, right? And
Yeah.
I wasn't that fond of the taste, so my coffee's pretty simple right now.
I'd love to try it. You know what I do is I just put the SCT in there and some protein powder and rock it out, man. And I do it twice a day. And I have an AeroPress that I use, and I love it, man.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of Sean Wells?
I haven't. I saw you mention him to me before, and I kind of looked into it, but I had never heard of him before. Now, I did check out a few things on him, but I'm not super familiar.
Because and I just bring it up. I got to interview him. He's actually having a retreat in Tulum. My wife and I are going to that. Got to meet him we were just at A4M also. Got to meet him at that.
Yeah.
And he has he's bills himself as and I think other people billed him first, and then he accepted it. It was hard for him, as was kind of revealed in the interview, as the world's greatest formulator. He's got a chemical, a product, an ingredient called dileucine. It's from Muscle Tech. I just have tried it. I'm probably 2 weeks into it, and I feel like it's made a difference. Supposed to have like 28% increase in muscle synthesis. So I don't know, maybe throw that on your radar. It's kind of cool to share different things.
Yeah, I was looking at it. It's just like a double bonded leucine molecule. Yeah, so I was looking at it. I mean, everything that's marketed is going to say 100% this gain, that gain. I mean, it's hard for me to believe that with especially a leucine product. However, leucine is very strong, and it's one of the best building blocks for muscle. So I bet you there's merit there. I don't know about those numbers. I don't want to say that they're not true, because I don't know the guy and I don't know the product. But some of those are.
It's pretty fantastic.
They're heavy numbers.
And placebo certainly could be going on. I do feel like there is a difference, and
That's
I've
awesome.
kind of taken it nonchalantly, like thrown it into my, I have, probably like you, have got a desk full of, stuff that I'm taking,
Yeah.
and hadn't really thought about the impact it would have. And I was like, hey man, I'm feeling like stronger. And when I saw him, he said that was good. But yeah, we're in the same boat. Like there's all sorts of people pitching all sorts of things, and then you got to try what and figure out what works for you. And that can be pretty challenging. One last question before we get to the wrap-up questions.
Yeah.
You said about a pound of fish. Are you doing any? Do you do any lean beef? Do you do any turkey? Like you do it?
So I you know what I do? I basically I go like this. I'll run you through my typical day. So I get up in the morning. I go for the walk. Like I said, I fast for about 3.5 hours at least. And I don't like my coffee for about an hour and a half after I've got up. I don't think it's good to take caffeine right away. So my first meal is like avocado toast. So I take one piece of Ezekiel bread. I like the raisin one. And I do the avocado on top, and then I'll make like an over easy egg, and I'll just do this little dab of maple syrup on the top and run it across the top.
Hey, there's your indulgence.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But you know what, man? That keeps me full for hours. And that's kind of like my pre-cardio meal type of deal. And then after that, I go right into that. Dude, if I could eat sea bass every day, but it's $30 a pound, so I either do sea bass or I do like a 12-ounce piece of salmon. And then I do 2-3 hours, and then I have a half a pound of ground bison with I always put bok choy in there, and then I do a little bit of mix of green peppers and onions and mushrooms and zucchini. And then later on, I have the Quest bar, and then I kind of snack on a little bit of Greek yogurt with protein powder in it. And then I do another 6 probably 6 egg whites, another whole egg, and then I do about a serving and a half of like glyphosate free oatmeal. And then I always mix. Man, I don't know. I found these walnut butter and this special cashew butter that we found at Whole Foods recently when I was in Vegas. Oh my gosh, dude. So I put that on there with some protein powder, and that's like kind of my typical day. What I'm trying to do, I'm supposed to be eating like 33 to 3,500 calories. Right now, I'm up to 27, which is huge from where I was. I'm doing like a 40-40-20. So I'm doing like 40% protein, 40% fat, and like 15 to 20% carbs, I guess. So I'm trying to hit about 125, 150 carbs, 110 fats, and 275 protein is where I'm trying to aim. Yeah.
Wow.
So we're getting there.
I'm throwing intermittent fasting in there, and it's 2 meals. First meal at 3, second meal whatever 7:30, somewhere between 7:30 and 9. And when I'm sitting down to the second meal, I'm like, I'm full of protein now, and I still have I have half of my protein to eat for the day. That's a lot. One, I was wrong. One last question: when you're doing cardio, are you doing zone 2, zone 3, what's your target?
So I used to just run 10 miles, but my foot is just beat to shit. And I've ran so much over time. So a lot of times I'm on the elliptical, like 80 minutes, and then I stair climb 20 and I'll run a mile or 2. But I'm generally in that zone 2 range. But at this point, man, I can sit there and have a full conversation with you going like really in deep, like an hour into my cardio, and I'm flying on the thing. I mean, when I get done with 80 minutes on the elliptical, I'm right at about a little under 1,100 calories right there that I burnt just on that alone. So,
yeah, it's always been hard for me to do zone 2 because it's so slow. Like, it just is so slow. But the concept of being higher than zone 2 means you're breaking down muscle that you just got to build later, versus being zone 2 where your body's going, hey, we got plenty of time. Let's tap into the fat reserves. That makes a lot of sense. Man, this has been awesome. I got some wrap up questions for you.
Yeah.
Dylan, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
Well, preferably 150.
150. I like it. How long do you think humans can live?
I have a feeling that you could live successfully over 100 if you start implementing, good practices, but that's going to take a lot. And we've been exposed to so many things over time. There'd have to be a lot of things that need to be done, that need to be cut out. I think that we are programmed, or at least built, to live over 100. I really do, like healthily and not age so quickly and so bad. I really do. I really believe that. But there's so many factors there that would need to change.
Yeah. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts, to longevity and a long health span that you can share?
Well, I would say sleep is one of the biggest ones, and dealing with stress. And that's easier said than done, but getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep consistently and trying to keep the same sleep times and patterns is a big, keeping your circadian rhythm on point. And I would say diet consistency, to the best of your ability, and really working on getting your macronutrients right. I stopped counting calories as much as I do the macros now. And I think that a part of the problem that creates stress is focusing too much on calories and not enough on the macronutrients.
And I'm going to put a fourth, because we really hammered it home earlier on, which was that consistency and, think long term, that mindset. Right? I think getting that's certainly you didn't put it in that list, but you've.
You thinking long term is huge. It's so important, and having the right mindset and thought process and all of this is such a big deal, because and that's where the stress comes into play, and it's overcoming that stress, learning how to deal with stress better, I guess, would be the thing, and controlling your cortisol and understanding what that is.
Yeah. What are 1 to 2 things people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
I think that sometimes people are not focused enough on taking day by day seriously. It's, I can have a bad day here, I can have a bad day there. And I think that if we didn't start throwing away days and time and put more value onto that people would definitely enhance their lifespan. I feel like there's a big lack there in understanding, and I think that's a big barrier for people. I really do.
Yeah. So not throwing away days. Like
yes,
it's
putting more of a value on the time that you have and the work that you're putting in, and not taking things for granted. I just think it's prevalent, man, and I think it's a problem. I really do.
Excellent. Dylan, how can people contact you?
Yeah, so I try to make it very easy on social media. So everything for me is at Dylan Gemelli. That's on Instagram, Facebook, X, and I hate TikTok, but I do post on there because I need to for work. And then I have just put, so I have my regular YouTube channels. I got Dylan Gemelli Biohacking, and now I changed one to called Dylan Gemelli Podcast, so it'll be easy to find. But now I'm transferring everything onto Apple, Spotify, like every place. So there's going to be some really good content there as well. And then if you want to email me, it's just dylangemelli@gmail.com. But if you're one of those people that doesn't care about the video aspect of it, my library that's going to be put up on Apple is going to blow your mind, and all of the other outlets.
Okay, and when you say on Apple, that's on the podcast?
Yes,
on the podcast
Apple,
channel?
Spotify, iHeart, all of those, yeah.
Excellent. And the podcast is called the Dylan Gemelli Podcast?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, awesome. And Dylan, what in the near future are you excited about?
Oh, man, I'm excited about everything coming up. I'm excited about the impact that I believe that I'm going to have the opportunity to make with others, and I'm excited about putting people on my platform and spotlighting so many different types of people, and helping get people that may have been missing a certain type of audience in front of the audiences that they are. And I'm excited to be guests on people's shows so that I can make an impact for them as well.
Awesome. Well, this has been amazing. You can find him. His social media handles are Dylan Gemelli. That's DYLANGEMELLI. So Dylan Gemelli. He's got the Dylan Gemelli podcast. You can email him, dylangemelli@gmail.com. Dylan, thank you so much for joining us today.
That was a blast, man. The time flew.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.